Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Kirby Superstar Ultra. In the last part we started off Meta Knightmare Ultra, and now we're actually going to go finish it. But like I mentioned the last part, the way we're handling Great Cave Offensive on in this campaign is we're going to be speeding it up, barring most of the boss fights, and playing some music over it while I try to go over anything else I can think of for this particular campaign. The main reason we're doing this is it's all the stuff we've seen before. We've seen all this level design before. We've seen 99% of the bosses in this campaign before. The only reason we're not speeding up some of them is because they're either the computer virus fights, because those take too long to begin with, or they're bosses we've already seen within this campaign for the most part. But there's so much footage to speed up here that we actually have multiple songs we're going to be using at the same time. I almost wanted to speed up all of the boss fights, barring the new ones. But if memory serves, that would have made this video like 10, 11 minutes based off the speed I was going at, and that just didn't feel right to me. I like my videos to be rather equivalent in length unless I literally have no choice. Because at the end of the day, even the bosses come down to the same strategy. You're either using the downward strikes, you're using the 1-2-3 combo slash, you're using Mach Tornado. There's not much variance in what you do in Meta Knightmare Ultra, which makes it fun to play, but like I brought up last time, it makes it a little hard to talk over or watch because there's not much new. I imagine if there was a way to do this mode single player, multiplayer rather, because I don't think there is for this particular mode. It could be kind of fun because you could even do some stuff, maybe like some blade clashing, but that's not a thing as far as I've ever been made aware, so oh well. And we're also probably going to handle similar modes that are needed for 100% in a Kirby game in the future the same way. Particularly once we get to the 2.5D games, rather. Also, something rather funny I should probably mention. Like I mentioned last time, whenever there's extra paths that are just out of the way for Kirby, like the left and right paths in either Crystal or the Garden here in Great Cave Offensive, those paths are removed. Remember how Old Tower's optional? Yeah, you don't have to enter the castle at all. In fact, you don't have to fight Chameleon Arm until Milky Way Wishes, I think, in Meta Knightmare, which is kind of funny. And with that, we're already basically done with Great Cave Offensive. Did I mean to leave this in at full speed? I don't think I did. Oh, well, we're keeping it. Besides, at this point, we're already very close to the end of Great Cave Offensive. Great Cave Offensive is kind of funny as Meta Knight because the boss fights, it feels like, take more time than the level design does in a lot of cases. It's like the only campaign that's like that, though, because once we get into Revenge of Meta Knight and Milky Way Wishes, things get a little long-winded overall. Three modes down, 2 to go. From memory, though, I want to say Meta Knight's Revenge is the longest of the modes you have to do in this campaign, I think. I do like that Meta Knight has his version basically for every single cutscene in the Kirby ones, at least the pre-rendered ones. And like I mentioned a few parts ago, I think during Revenge of the King, Meta Knight even has his own version of the opening cinematic that shows up randomly when you start the game back up, which is kind of fun. In fact, we actually have another difference right here. Heavy Lobster here on the back of the halberd. You have to defeat him in this playthrough, whereas in Kirby, I think it's possible to beat him, but you're just very unlikely to because of the timer for the engine to start up. Kind of weird, but I at least appreciate being able to fight it in that straightforward a manner, and that means I can actually fast forward the fight against it later on in the Revenge of the Meta Knight scenario, because that walk-up takes a weird amount of time out of a video this long. Also, I know you've seen the name of the song earlier, but every single speed-up track we're doing in this scenario is from Smash Bros. Brawl. Particularly, I went for songs that played during Subspace Emissary because in a lot of ways, Revenge of Meta Knight, Meta Knightmare Ultra, and Milky Way Wishes have a lot of the same vibe in terms of level design to me as Subspace Emissary, and given that Sakurai was, you know, majorly involved in the production, I guess that's not too surprising. I think these games pull it off better than Subspace, because Subspace is a fighting game that has a platforming campaign for some reason. I say that, but I really did not like... I wish World of Light and Ultimate was closer to that in a lot of ways. I appreciate World of Light's forwardness with just being about the fights with some fun little gimmicks in the overworld, but something about Subspace's cutscene presentation and everything felt really earnest in trying to just be some stupid, cool-looking crossover rather than any sort of deep story. Because sometimes I appreciate when things try to actually say anything or have a meaning, but sometimes you just need that cool spectacle piece. It's why Godzilla fans like Godzilla movies. We're not there for the emotional stories of the people, even though it does help build out the world. At the end of the day, we're there to see monsters be cool. That's why I liked Godzilla King of the Monsters in 2019. That was a really good Godzilla movie. Godzilla vs. Kong had some weird stuff in it, but I still thought the action scenes were fun, especially that last one. Godzilla 2014, too many people. Too much focus on the people. And the people do good with their acting, but I'd rather they focused on anything else. I guess if there's some strategy I can tell you when it comes to playing the Meta Knightmare, Mach Tornado is really good to rely on for boss fights, like I've said before, but if you know there's going to be a boss fight you have more trouble with relatively soon afterwards, maybe forego using it on one boss to save it for another, but also be aware that it's also kind of bustedly broken against boss fights you wouldn't expect it to be. We'll see this in a few minutes when we get to the Halberd Core. You can use it on that to, I believe, instant kill it, or at least still do damage to it, so you don't need to rely on like the lasers for that fight. The main place you should really save it, though, is for what I would say is just the final boss period. Like, if you know you're coming towards the end of Milky Way Wishes, hold on to your points. You're actually going to want maybe 50 points, not around there for like a Mach Tornado and 2 heals, but maybe for 5 heals, because Mach Tornado is specifically programmed to not do a lot of damage to the final boss. It does some damage, but it only does like maybe 10% of their health versus everything else is 60+% just about. Oh, also, probably should go without saying, but because we're playing as Meta Knight, we don't fight Meta Knight in the Meta Knight's Revenge section of this. The Halberd Core is the final boss. It could have been kind of neat if you fought like a Kirby here instead, or Mass DDD for some reason could have been a guess replaceable boss here, but at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. And like I said, pretty good to use Mach Tornado here. God damn. Four down, 1 to go. Meta Knight's journey through Milky Way Wishes is notably shorter than Kirby's for a couple of reasons. For one thing, you don't have to go after any of the copy abilities, so you don't have to go through any of the optional pathways, so the levels are quicker for that alone. But also, you don't do any of the Nova level. So there's no 2D side-scrolling shoot-em-ups or any of that. Once you've beaten... I forget what the name of the final planet was again already. It wasn't Mechai, it's the one after that. whatever it is, you go straight to the final boss from that. In some ways, that can make it a little weird, because the pacing, there's just very little cutscenes in the way. In fact, there's basically not even any setup for what's going to happen at the end of this section. But, well, mind you, to begin with, Meta Knightmare Ultra is a bit of a weird scenario, in that, if memory serves, it's the first or second instance of a scenario in a Kirby game that has canon stuff in it to the Kirby timeline, but the events of the scenario itself are non-canon. So, like, the existence of the final boss of this scenario is canon. Meta Knight fighting him at the end of this is not, which is just kind of weird. But oh well, I'm thinking too hard about the story of a series about a pink puffball who inhales enemies. Cool. You know, last time, I think it was, I brought up the idea that I think Meta Knight would be a better protagonist for a Kirby Metroidvania like Katam instead of Kirby because of the whole technique angle. For one thing, I realized between parts, Bandana D could do just the same. In fact, you could argue he could do more interesting things with the spear than Meta Knight could with the sword for mobility stuff. But now that I think about it, something I'm kind of surprised about is how few, if any, real spin-offs Kirby's gotten that are focused entirely on the side characters. Because I can't think of one. Usually we just get these modes like Meta Knightmare. I'm kind of surprised we don't have, like, a little DDD game of some sort. I'm not sure what it could be. If anything, like a King DDD game would probably be a parody of SimCity now that I think about it in some regards. But there's some fun stuff I think you could do there. We'll just never actually see them do it. Also, hi Chameleon Arm, and it's about to be bye Chameleon Arm. You know, something I've never actually done now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever actually looked at the Superstar Ultra speedrun records before. Let's take a look at that real quick. I want to say Shasta's in the top 3 for 100%. Yeah, Mr. Shasta's actually still number 1 on that. Anyone else I know on here? I've had some chats with MK over the years. Hey, Rux, how you doing down there? Meta Knightmare Ultra's got its own particular, what's it called? Subcat, and lowest in-game time at the moment is 24 minutes-ish. Beat Revenge of the King is its own category, which I find a little weird. But I guess that's like just getting through to Mass Meta Knight. So that's 48 minutes-ish, not too bad. Miss Shasta's world record's just exactly over 2 hours, so that's honestly, that's pretty fast. But now I'm curious how that compares to the original Superstar. It's gonna be shorter to begin with for that, obviously, because there's less game there, but 100% there, an hour, so they added an hour of new content for 100% in SSU. 80%'s 33 minutes. Yeah, it's about the times that sound right. Thinking about it, though, a part of me wonders if the reason they gave Mach Tornado to Meta Knight was so they had a way to speed up the boss fights on top of just Meta Knight's moveset, allowing him to get through level design pretty quickly with how much he can do with just his sword. That would give extra purpose to the timer, now that I think about it as well, so that actually about tracks. With that said, I hope by now you understand the reason why I decided to speed up the latter half of this. I also probably could have even sped up 2/3 of Meta Knight's Revenge, just because it is that redundant at the end of the day. It's a shame because there's always modes like this in games that are just more fun to play than they are to watch or talk over, unless there's like a long period between the original playthrough and otherwise. Like, say I did Meta Knightmare Ultra in particular, like, as a side LP a year down the line. That could save me from having to... That could give me a lot to refresh about, could give me new conversation topics to talk about. But because it's all for the 100% rating, I have that unfortunate angle of, well, there's a short list of things to talk about that's going to quickly run out. And us being near the end of the LP period to begin with only accentuates that. Thankfully, I'll have plenty to talk about when it comes to the other side modes we still have yet to do. With that said, like I brought up, I believe, the last part, once you're done with this boss fight, you're done with recycled content. It's going to be entirely new cutscenes and a new boss fight moving forward, and I'm excited. Let's take a look at what the game has to offer for us, shall we? ready. I will grant you one wish. My one wish is to become stronger. So I wish to fight the greatest warrior in the galaxy. Okay. You will now fight a warrior who was sealed away for fear his power was too great. I will now summon this great warrior once more. 3, 2, 1, go. I love this boss theme, because it's time for Galactonite. Galactonite in some ways fights like just a more aggressive Meta Knight from Meta Knight's Revenge, but he flies a lot more actively, and he has a lot more long-range projectile attacks. You can summon some enemies that'll fall from the sky that you can use as Meta Knight at least to refill your Meta Knight points at least, so you can get yourself some extra heals. You can fire some projectiles from his shield. He does some 1-2-3 combos. He can do the down thrust just like Meta Knight, but when he does it, causes a shockwave to travel across the screen, just like DDD's electric hammer. This fight's complicated, but it's not exactly what I would call hard, as long as you were good about saving up some meta points to have some extra heals on hand. If you're trying to do this on a single life bar, yeah, he can be a bit of a nightmare. Especially for this attack, where he causes a ring of lasers to go across the screen, which the way you dodge that is you get below where it starts, and then try to fly above it as it tries to get back behind you, because it always, I believe, goes above him from where it starts. So you can use that pattern recognition to get through it pretty quickly. This is a fight you should also not underestimate the power of having a helper nearby to help absorb some attacks, but also use the guard button. It will save your ass more times than you can probably count. And if you don't do that, well, if you like me, you probably have a lot of lives still. We got, what, 12 down there? So you got potentially plenty of tries. When he starts doing the charges, where I find him to be a little more unpredictable, because I can never tell where the charges are going to come from for some reason. But enough swinging your sword, and hopefully you'll beat the mode. That's Meta Knightmare Ultra. It's a fun mode, but it definitely isn't the most original. I think by and large it is the longest of the main modes, though, if you just play through it from start to finish. Because from memory, since it contains all the other ones, you're still in it for longer than, say, Meta Knight's Revenge, even with the missing stuff there, or the missing content from Great Cave Offensive, since you don't have to go for any of the treasures. It's fun. It really is. The biggest problem with it is that in order to get 100% you need to do it because it's all stuff you've already done before. Would I say between this and Revenge of the King if Superstar Ultra is more worth picking up than the original Superstar? For me, yes, but that's because there's some quirks with the original graphically, and especially when it comes to controls and screen ratio size, that I think work better in Superstar Ultra than it does in the original. But if this campaign and Revenge of the King didn't convince you, what's remaining definitely won't, I guess is the way to say it. you can really play either version and have a solid Kirby adventure by the end of it. There's just more in Superstar Ultra, and sometimes more isn't exactly the best. But I'll save my full thoughts for when we finish off the next 2 parts worth of content. I think there's 2 parts left, because we got a lot of arenas to show off. Oh boy. Thankfully, at least the arenas have, in some ways, more to talk about because of some minor mechanics they all have. With that, though, because this is at the end of the day just a version of the Milky Way Galaxy credits with Meta Knight stuff over it, I think I'll just preemptively end the part here and let the rest of the credits play out on their own. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 13, we're going to start going for the smaller modes that Superstar Ultra added, as well as, I believe, play all the mini-games that this collection has to offer, because we might as well show those off as well, right? See you guys then.